taking the reins. So we'll be talking tonight everything about transitioning from pediatric to adult rheumatology care. And I am so excited. When I was looking at the chat, I almost couldn't pull myself away to start this session because we have so many people in the room tonight that are excited about being with their child or teen or healthcare professionals here together, all to really support you through their transition and talk about what it means to thrive. I would like to take a moment to thank our sponsors, Nicola Wealth Management, AbbVie, Amgen, and Sobi. Their support has been instrumental in being able to provide this ongoing virtual education to our community. They also have helped us build an incredible virtual library of past sessions, everything from uveitis to methotrexate, biologic, mental health, caregiver self-help. And so I really encourage you to take a cup of tea, coffee, glass of wine if you like, visit cassieandfriends.ca and really take a look around the amazing resources that we have for you and your child or teen, or you as a youth yourself. In addition to the past recordings, we also have a classroom, which is a resource section that is separated into topics for newly diagnosed families, those needing injection support, a school toolkit with classroom resources, and so many other great opportunities to review past FAQs from other sessions and really learn about the topics that you're facing in whatever stage of your journey you might be in. So that brings us to everyone who's in the room today. And as you can see, we have an incredible over 100 people actually joining us today from 47 cities and towns across Canada, representing 12 care centers and 10 provinces. Today, during the session, you might find yourself hearing from speakers or healthcare professionals or youth sharing stories, and they might not be from your province or your clinic, and you might wonder if they relate to you. But in putting together this event tonight, our original concept before COVID was this sort of vision of a national transition fair for juvenile arthritis, where youth and families and healthcare professionals could learn from each other, share stories, understand or hear about other people's practices, and really gather the information we need either to provide the best care or to help our child or ourselves really navigate the amazing process that's ahead of you as you transition out of pediatric care and into adult life. We even hope you'll be able to take some of those learnings today back to your own centers, healthcare teams, and healthcare practices with you. The other thing that might happen at a transition or traditional transition fair with expo booths and ballrooms is that you might end up sitting next to someone and hit it off and exchange contact information. And suddenly you have this amazing friend who's there to support you, whether it's through the occasional text message, email, or Snapchat. But we wanted to remind everyone that even though that's not possible in the traditional sense today, it is amazingly cool and unique that when we get to the breakout sessions, you're going to be sitting with 5, 10, 15, up to 20 families from your own center and region. And that just doesn't happen in the clinic waiting room. These are people who are facing the same big challenges, big fears, big changes that you are. And Cassie and Friends is really about helping to form those connections that you can take with you through whatever challenges or new scenarios you face. And one of the ways that you can do that through Cassie and Friends is we have a private Facebook group. It's called Juvenile Arthritis Canada. And as you can see, there are 412 members on there now. It's a super active community. And we have Cassie and Friends parent ambassadors that regularly participate in the conversations that happen, parents posting questions, celebrating achievements, posting, whether it be medication changes or flares or school issues. And our ambassadors are in there helping everyone navigate to all of those resources I shared earlier that are sitting on the Cassie and Friends website. So that now we'll talk about what's next. So what's coming up next? So right after this session, you are going to receive a survey email. And we really hope that you'll fill that out. Your feedback is really important to us as we set future events. but also in that email is an amazing list of resources that are specific to transition. And so as we leave this event today and we start to implement some of the practices we learn or the thinking that we hear from others, this is going to be a great email to go back to with lots of links. It includes other resources and stories on our own website, amazing resources that have been generated from Canadian pediatric rheumatology research about juvenile arthritis transition best practices, and also links to podcasts like Take a Pain Check, where you can actually find regular content produced by youth for youth. Team Cassie and Friends is also still in the race. Right now we have Toronto and Halifax team running, and you're welcome to join those actually from wherever you live in Canada. If you go to cassieandfriends.ca run, and this run team is not only about raising awareness for juvenile arthritis, but really is part of the fuel that helps us fund all of the work we do at Cassie and Friends, from research to patient support. And we're particularly excited about our Halifax team because this is the very first year we have had a team in Nova Scotia, and we are working really hard to raise funds to establish our first equipment and family fund at the IWK. Lastly, our next virtual education session is on injection support. Depending on where you are in your medication process, you might also call this an injection reset session or an injection survival session. But we have a pediatric rheumatologist from Alberta Children's Hospital, a nurse from rheumatology, a child psychologist, and more, along with patient and family stories to help you navigate every aspect of medication injections. So finally, just a few housekeeping items. So we usually do a live Q&A, which is still going to happen, but it's going to happen in your breakout room. So after our presentations that we'll be together for, watch your screen, because you're going to receive, or you're going to see a little pop-up that's going to invite you to join a breakout room. Click accept, and then by the magic of Zoom, you will go to that room. And there you'll be able to turn on your mic and camera. And when you have questions, you can just submit it using the chat box in your bottom bar. If there's a question that doesn't get answered, we're always happy to field questions after the session, and you can just send an email to info@cassieandfriends.ca. And that brings us to our main presentation. So for our very first presentation of this session, I'm really excited to introduce Dr. Natasha Gakhal, Dr. Evelyn Rozenblyum, and physiotherapist Danielle MacCormack from the Arthritis Society. And together they form the transition team for juvenile idiopathic arthritis at the Women's College Hospital, which is also associated with sick kids. This team's approach to transition in the time I have known them is so warm, so caring, so much about continuous quality improvement. They were the very first transition clinic of their kind in Ontario, launched in 2019. And they are just as much about focusing on excellence and in-treatment care as they are about just helping youth gain confidence in themselves to navigate the wide range of network services that are available to them. And I'm very excited to welcome them to turn on their cameras, and they are going to introduce an overview on transition principles.
Hi, everyone. I'm Natasha Gakhal. I am an adult rheumatologist at Women's who helps to run the transition clinic. Thank you to Cassie and Friends for hosting this great event. This is the second year we've done an event like this, and the first year was really successful. And so we're hoping you guys will get a lot out of it tonight. For this first little bit, this is just going to be a general overview about what transition looks like. Next slide, please. So the objectives of this whole session really is to support patients and families and to understand the who, what, where, when, why, and how of transition. So we're going to go through each of these in a little bit of detail, and we can talk more about them in the breakout rooms as well. Next slide. So one of the disclaimers we want to give right at the beginning is this seems like a lot of information and may seem overwhelming, but just remember it's a process and you don't need to learn everything at once. And over time, you'll develop the skills and become more comfortable. We'll become more comfortable with your new environment and your providers. Next slide, please. So for the first, who transitions? Next slide. So, you know, there's a good number of patients who continue to have disease into adulthood. So anywhere from 40 to 70%, depending on the particular disease. So there's a good proportion of pediatric patients who will need ongoing rheumatology care in the adult world. And what we're really trying to do is to provide the skills to help you transition from the pediatric realm to the adult realm. Next slide. And obviously there's lots of concerns from the youth side. You may feel like you're not ready for this. You might be scared about what it's like because you've never been to an adult provider. You might feel like you're being abandoned or left behind by your pediatric rheumatologist. And then their parents have lots of concerns as well. They feel abandoned as well too. Lots of our parents tell us that even their pediatric rheumatologist felt like a parent to them as well because they've known their children since they were really young. They're scared that their kids won't be able to stand up for themselves or have the skills to be able to navigate the adult system on their own. And they're also worried that they might be sidelined by the adult providers. Next slide, please. But, you know, your providers also have concerns. So on the pediatric side, it's really hard for the pediatric rheumatologist to let you go. They've known you since you were really young. They're worried that you won't actually make it to the adult provider, that you won't go for your appointments or you'll miss your appointments. And they also have concerns that you may not be ready or have the skills to be able to cope in the adult system. And in the adult world, on the adult side, adult providers have some concerns as well. You know, we're worried about the parents. You know, we're worried that they're going to be too involved and take over the patient's care. We're worried about who's responsible. Do I talk to the parent? Do I talk to the youth? And there might be a sense of frustration with youth because you're going through several different transitions through your life at the same time. Next slide, please. It's important to recognize that there will be some differences between pediatric and adult centers. Typically on the adult side, they're busier clinics. So when you go there, there's going to be a lot more people, and that typically translates into less time. Not always, but a lot of the time that's the case. On the adult side, a lot of centers just don't have the team that the pediatric rheumatologists tend to. So they might not necessarily be a nurse or a physiotherapist or other types of therapists that are part of the team and that would see you at each visit. One of the big things is that almost all of our joint injections are done in clinic at the clinic visit. So we don't do it at a separate time in a separate place. And that can be sometimes frightening when it's the first time. And then sometimes the investigations we order, like the blood work or the x-rays or MRIs, are slightly different on the adult side. Next slide, please. So next, going on to what is transition. So next slide. So transition is actually a planned, purposeful event for adolescents with chronic health conditions moving from the child to the adult healthcare system. So it's important to know that this is a process, not an event. And a lot of the time it does feel like an event, and we'll talk about the different models that are across the country, but it really should be a process. Next slide, please. And so planning obviously is key. And, you know, we understand that there's a lot going on at this time in your life. We know that school and career are front and center, and so there's a lot of competing demands there. We know socially you have a lot going on as well. There can be a lot of mental health issues as well, and then of course we always have to talk about sexuality and reproduction as well. And now I'm going to hand it over to Evelyn to go on with the next part.
Thank you so much, Natasha. Hi, everyone. So nice to have such a varied group from across the country. So I hope I do justice to the where. Next slide, please. So philosophy of transition clinic. So there's many different ways that folks do transition across the country, and I think it's really center dependent. I think at the bottom of every well-intentioned transition program or physicians who do undertake this work is to make sure that our patients do cross that bridge and are successful in not only managing their conditions, but also in other aspects of their lives. Next slide, please. So we're very lucky in Canada. If you could click twice. Yeah, so initially we had just a few transition clinics formally, and now we have a whole lot more across the country, which we're really excited to get into in our breakout rooms. The philosophies, like I mentioned, of each clinic is different. So for instance, our clinic is very similarly modeled after the Vancouver clinic, where we have a shared care model between pediatrics and adult and follow them for many years of their transition into young adult. There's other centers where the adult rheumatologist comes to the pediatric center and they have a few visits to get to know the adult rheumatologist before they go over. There are other centers where the pediatric practitioner goes to the adult center and has a few visits there until the patient feels comfortable and they hand over. And there's a lot of different ways that it's done, just depending on the population and the center. There's also some centers just do one part of rheumatology and others do young adult with rheumatic diseases, so every rheumatic condition. So again, you'll learn more about that in your breakout rooms, and I hope I did that justice, but it's really nice that there's more and more of these formalized programs being developed. Next slide, please. So usually when we set up a transition clinic, we try to make sure that we're able to address a lot of the other issues that are going on too. So making sure we have links to mental health services, and especially with the pandemic, there was such a huge rise in anxiety and depression in folks. So making sure that we address those issues as well, especially in people with chronic diseases, this can be an issue. Patients with uveitis, making sure we have that adult link. TMJ arthritis is something that a lot of our adult colleagues aren't as comfortable with. So making sure that we have the expertise moving into adulthood, making sure in some parts of Canada, people have pediatricians for primary care. So making sure that they actually get a family doctor as they transition. Taking care of the other life transitions, as we mentioned. And we also often have a connection with the pediatric providers. So we can still, touch base with that cornerstone of your transition process. Next slide, please. So again, transition is a process, and I wanted to stress our warning from initially. You don't have to accomplish all of this right out the gate. It really takes time, and most pediatric centers are trying to empower youth and parents about this process early on at about 12 to 14 as we start planning and giving the youth and the young adults and adolescents more autonomy over their care. Next slide. So there's many goals for transitions of patients. So in the end, we want you to develop the skills, but you have to learn how to stand up for yourself, understand your health condition and your treatments, and really take care of your health. Next slide. And the why. I will pass this on to, yes, I will, I'll pass this on to Danielle.
Okay, so I'm happy to be here and to be part of this and to be a part of this transition clinic. I think this was an amazing kind of opportunity for myself as a physiotherapist. So why is transition important? Well, there are many reasons, but the first thing is the risk of getting lost to follow up. And I have, over my career as a physiotherapist in arthritis care, I've seen young adults that have left their rheumatology, pediatric rheumatologist, and moved on by themselves. And they may have flares in their condition and interrupt medication. So we want to make sure we avoid all of these situations. We really want to make a big effort in you being aware of what kind of care you need. And we want to make sure transition is seamless. We want to try to make it as easy as it could be to transition to adult care. Next slide, please. So how to transition? Well, there's two parts to this. Next slide, please. There are the patient goals, the young adults goals, and there's the parent goals. So it's really important for you to remember that you just have to show up, because we don't want to lose you to follow up. We want to make sure that we help you transition the best way possible. We want you to be well aware of your diagnosis and your medication, and if you've missed doses or whatever, it's really important to be aware of that, the importance of that. We want to make sure that you know where your coverage for medication will come from, any kind of insurance coverage. We want to make sure that if you have concerns, that you know them and you can express them at the clinic. And concerns like mental health concern or activity, drugs, sexuality, all of these topics we talked about earlier. Making sure that you know where you're coming to in the next part of your life to this new clinic. Making sure that you notify the center if you're going to miss an appointment or just change it. And to this day, in this virtual world with COVID, we've had lots of times where we could switch from in-person to virtual to phone. So it's really important you notify us and not miss the appointment. And a big part also is to decide if you want someone to come along. Like probably before, the last few years, you had your parent coming along. So if you want to continue that for a while, that's fine. But this decision has to be made. Next slide, please. So the parent's goal, from our perspective, it's really important to learn to let go. It's really difficult when you spent all these years with the care team in pediatric rheumatology, and all of a sudden your young adult is coming to us, and we're trying to make them more independent and acquire all the skills to manage their healthcare. So it's really shifting your role from a manager to a support role. So from now on, we'll pass it back on to Evelyn to complete the session.
Thank you so much. So there are many tools as well that we can employ to use to how to, as a tool to transition successfully. In some centers, McMaster especially really highlight this tool, which is fantastic. So next slide, please. And so in the tool, it's really nice to know your health summary. So really important to even just break it down into, of course, your age, but actually spelling out the name of your diagnosis sometimes is challenging because you have your doctor or your parent saying it all the time for you, and a brief medical history of what's gone on with you. And if you were too young and you don't remember that you had joint injections when you were little, might be something good to ask your mom or dad to remind you about, or your physician. Next, you want to know your treatment plan. So the name of, back. Right. Almost done. Thank you. Yeah, perfect. Your treatment plan. So the name of your medications themselves, which is also could be very tricky and could take a lot of practice. Doses is a bonus. And then any questions that you were thinking about, don't be shy. This is your appointment. The visits are all about you. So it's really important to have this in place. Next slide, please. So this is an example. I'm 16. I was diagnosed with polyarticular JIA, or just poly-JIA, and uveitis at age 6. I'm treated with eye drops, naproxen, and methotrexate. And I think I'm having a flare because I'm stiff in the morning and it's hard to walk. So anything like this is really nice to go into your new meeting with. Next slide, please. Also important to take charge of your appointments. I think most people have smartphones, so use it. Use your calendar function, your reminder functions to help you take your medications, identify your health concerns and social issues, make a list of all the new team members, their roles, their contact info, any My Charts or other ways to communicate with the team. And then make sure you follow up and take some ownership on the test bookings, test results and referrals that are made. Next slide, please. So you're not being kicked out. Next slide. You're developing the skills to graduate successfully and move on across the bridge to your new care provider. Next slide. And so we hope we provided you with a positive and supportive environment where you're able to ask questions, learn, and grow as people with chronic conditions. Next slide. Oh, sorry, these were supposed to be hidden. I think that's it. There should be a question slide at the end. Yeah, no, these are all, I'm done. So thank you so much, everyone, for being at this portion of the talk. And if you have any questions at all, we're happy to answer them at any point, happy to share our contact information. Otherwise, I think you'll get a lot of the answers in the breakout rooms. Thank you. On behalf of myself, Dr. Gakhal, and Danielle MacCormack.
Awesome. Thank you so much to the whole Women's College Hospital team. That was amazing. I got too excited and I started clicking fast when you talked about that 3-question summary, because I was just thinking how useful that is to distill what could be like 18 years of history into like a really dynamic statement that can be easily communicated at an appointment. Thank you again, and I'm really excited now to introduce the first of our 3 youth speakers. Each of these youth, they're going to share a different aspect, a different focus of learning that they found through their transition. And first up is Emma Linsley. Emma was actually referred to us or connected to Cassie and friends from her pediatric rheumatologist, who's Dr. Rozenblyum in Saskatchewan. And so I think that speaks to how special the pediatric rheumatology and patient relationship can be, because they had actually just done a podcast together. Emma was born in Saskatoon and is currently a 3rd-year student at McGill, pursuing a Bachelor's of Science with a major in psychology. And since being diagnosed with juvenile idiopathic arthritis in high school, she's really gone on to be an amazing advocate and member of the arthritis community. And so with that, I'm very excited to please introduce and welcome Emma Linsley and ask her to turn on her camera and join us.
Can you hear me and see me okay?
We sure can.
Beautiful. Alrighty, first and foremost, I do just want to thank Cassie and friends for having me. I think this webinar is super important, and it's addressing some key things that go on when transitioning from pediatric to adult care. So thank you for hosting, and thank you for providing me with a platform to share my story. I'm really excited to learn more about what can be done and what is being done to facilitate successful pediatric to adult transitions. Next slide. So just kind of reiterating a bit of what Jennifer said, my name is Emma Linsley. I was born in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, and that's kind of where I received most of my treatment. Currently, I'm in Montreal, Quebec, where I'm attending McGill University. So kind of my background with patient advocacy, it came from my relationship with my rheumatologist back in Saskatchewan, who referred me to some podcasts, helped me speak at some conferences, and allowed me to be a patient representative on the White Paper Committee for Health Science Research in Saskatchewan. Here in Montreal, I enjoy my time volunteering with Friendship Circle, and I'm on the McGill Association for Collaborative Mental Health Care. And I also am a researcher at the Douglas Institute of Mental Health. Next slide. So just kind of going into my transition history, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis in April of 2016 when I was 15 years old. You got a nice little 15-year-old me photo there. And I was treated in the pediatric outpatient ward of RUH in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. I could not have been more fortunate with the team that I had. My treatment team was amazing, and they really empowered me to take ownership over my treatment and have an active role in my treatment. And so I began my transition to adult care when I was 17, so 2 years into my treatment. And this was actually facilitated by my pediatric rheumatologist within our regular appointments. And so there was about a couple month overlap after I was referred to adult rheumatology, where I was seeing both my adult rheumatologist and my pediatric rheumatologist. So I got to meet my new doctor while kind of wrapping up my time in peds. And so just a bit of a layout of what my current situation is. So my primary adult rheumatologist is still in Saskatchewan, although I am in Quebec. And so Quebec, I use the healthcare system for blood work and my medications and any kind of like clinical or like emergency or non-emergent medical issues. Next slide. So my transition experience overall, I gotta say, was pretty successful. What went super well was accessing care. Clinically speaking, like I had everything very well set up. It was really easy to set up blood work here in Montreal. It was like a phone call to my university clinic. Transferring medications to a new pharmacy was very easy. And getting an actual rheumatologist in Saskatoon was very easy as well. But something that I did really struggle with was kind of the paper trail aspect of navigating the healthcare system. I didn't know how to do insurance and apply for like different extended medical benefits. I didn't know that in some provinces, they don't take your health card, so you have to like bill back to your original province. And a new thing that I'm kind of running into is aging out of my parents' insurance plans. So those are all things that I've encountered that I've kind of had to learn along the way. And with that, also being chronically ill, learning what disability status means in terms of like employment benefits and university OSD, so Office for Students with Disabilities, and student disability status for student loans. Next slide. And so overall, it was pretty successful. And I do really have to say that that is the result of having an amazing support network. My doctors facilitated the clinical transition seamlessly, and my parents really helped me with the logistical transition of it. And so when I was back in Saskatchewan, they did a super good job of helping me find the information related to like insurances and stuff like that when transferring over. And they really sat down and taught me how to do it and offered me emotional support throughout the way of moving away now to Montreal and also moving from pediatric to adult care. In addition, I was like pretty resourceful and independent kind of person. I still am. And so I really took ownership over my treatment and made sure I spent many hours on the phone with my school and with the government so that all my forms were filled in and that I was getting the best treatment as possible. And now in Quebec, this has been a whole new adventure because Quebec's system was very different than the one back home. I've really leaned into relationships with friends who are from Quebec and who have immense knowledge about the system here. I'm really thankful that I have an aunt and uncle in the city who are able to provide me with transportation to clinics when I need. But I've really learned how to navigate the Quebec system throughout trial and error. One time I went to a clinic because I thought I had pneumonia, and I realized that they wouldn't treat me because I didn't have a Quebec health card. So then I had to go to a different one and learn the whole billing it back to Saskatchewan process. But overall, like the more you do it and the more times you're on the phone and the more calls you make, the more support systems you lean into, you can come out with some pretty successful outcomes. Next slide. But something that I did know is that if I didn't have parents who played an active role in my treatment and transition, and if I didn't have that clinical facilitation and didn't take the time to research, I honestly wouldn't know where to start. And so next slide. Something that I would really like to see kind of implemented in the future is kind of a paper trail roadmap that teaches patients to how to complete like insurance and government forms and have conversations with employers about chronic illness and access disability and educational bursaries and benefits. The transition to a new clinic was not, for me, in my experience, the difficult part, but learning all the logistics was, especially moving to a new city, trying to learn how to travel and fill in all the different yearly paperwork. And so hopefully in the future, I'd like to see some implementation of checklists for patients on what you need when you go traveling, who do you need to talk to, and some advice for what yearly paperwork needs to be done. Like, when do you need to apply for extended medical benefits and the timing for all of that. And so that is a bit of my experience. I'm looking forward to hearing more from the other patient speakers. And thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much, Emma. That was awesome. You shared so many great tips, and I think you're a real part today in helping so many other youth and parents know where to start, like you said, which is amazing. So for our next speaker, I'm really excited to introduce Chelsea Woolf. And I think I first met Chelsea Woolf, or she first came to Cassie and Friends as an applicant to our JIA PACER program, which is actually a group of youth from across Canada, but working through the University of Calgary to actually research and recommend transition improvement processes for youth with juvenile arthritis across Canada. And Chelsea was going to be part of our initial cohort, but then as life happens when you're young, she got very, very busy with school and also in her training. Chelsea is now a paramedic firefighter living in Fort McMurray, but she was born in Calgary and diagnosed at the age of 2. And I'm really excited to welcome Chelsea.
Thank you so much, Jen. And thank you, Emma. Your story was amazing. It was so exciting to hear someone else just like me. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be a part of this conversation. I'll start by telling you a bit about my backstory, and then I'll get into my transition and how it went, and maybe some advice that I can share and how to tackle it yourself. So hi, my name is Chelsea. I'm 23. I was born and raised in Calgary, and I am currently living in Fort McMurray. When I was 2 years old, my index finger accidentally got jammed in a seatbelt when I was being buckled into my car seat. And as random as an act that this was, over time, the swelling never went down. And my mom started to notice, as I got better walking as well, that I would limp, which was a really big red flag for her and my dad, of course, but my mom always took me to my doctor's appointments. So to make a long story short, after many tests, I was diagnosed with juvenile idiopathic arthritis. So for the past 21 years, my life has consisted of all the specialist appointments, blood work, and many medication trial and errors to control the disease. And today I struggle mostly with using my hands, my wrists, my knees, and along with some chronic fatigue that impedes my day-to-day life. I'm so thankful for my team at the Alberta Children's Hospital. Having been with them up until the age of 18, I'm sure you can imagine and maybe have even gone through a similar experience where you have such a strong bond and trust with the team you're working with. So my pediatric rheumatologist, who is here today, hello, is still a huge role model to me. When I transitioned to the adult clinic, it really felt like I was losing a friend and someone who I'd come to trust so much. There's a definite grieving process that I had to go through. And I was angry and sad that I had to change doctors. And I really resented the change and found it hard to find the urge to build a good rapport with my new rheumatologist. My mom still wishes that she was able to stay with her because this is a woman who took care of her baby girl when she couldn't. She didn't know anything medical, right? So it was very hard for the both of us to accept someone new into our lives and leave the comfortable bubble that we had built. So here in Calgary, I am in Calgary currently, but there is a yard clinic. So I was assigned to an adult rheumatologist by my pediatric team. So the Children's Hospital here, of course, is full of colors and stickers, and most importantly, all the resources right at your fingertips. So the team that I had would make it so easy for me to organize my appointments, often all on the same day. So that was super helpful, as well as they never missed a requisition or prescription refill because they had such a good support system and communication between specialties. So when I transitioned, there was a lot of eye-opening experiences, and that's kind of what I wanted my speech to be about today, is all the differences between the two and some of the challenges that I faced here in Calgary. So the first of which was the environment. So it was strange walking into a busy gray clinic and having to wait a long time to see my doctor and only getting maybe 10 minutes of her time. It made me uncomfortable to no longer see kids my age, but people at least 20 to 30 years older than I was. Other patients would look at me funny, and I could read their questioning expressions as to why an 18-year-old was there. Whereas when you're at the children's, no one's really giving it a second thought because a lot of kids there, of course, are sick. Secondly, I no longer had every resource in the same building. For example, I needed to make my own appointments elsewhere for blood work because the one at the clinic was too far for me to drive. And if I need x-rays, then I had to have them booked farther in advance, and couldn't simply just walk over with my brand new requisition in hand from my rheumatologist, like I was able to do often at the children's. So for the first time, I really had to advocate for myself and utilize the little time I had with the new adult rheumatologist, and to make sure I had all my questions answered and my requisitions and prescription slips signed and in my hands before leaving, because once I left, I'd have to go through a few people by phone in order to get in touch with the doctor, which wasn't an easy, quick process like it had been with the children's. Thirdly, it's a new world to me with insurance, like how Emma was describing. It's crazy, and it's of course I'm going to speak about Alberta, but it's insane at any province in the country. So most kids fall under their parents' insurance provider. However, when you turn 18, often you're no longer covered, or you can be covered into university. Because I chose to take a gap year before going to college, I no longer qualified under my father's plan. So I knew with my arthritis, I would fall under that pre-existing category. And I was really nervous because that gives some insurance providers the ability to reject coverage. So I was nervous that I would have to start saving money to pay for my biologic, which on its own costs $1,600, which is just insane. So transitioning is uncomfortable on its own, and it's even harder when we're gearing up to leave high school, go to university, maybe move away from home. And there's a lot of changes in that little amount of time. So mentally, of course, it can be extremely stressful. And since now there's another burden of making sure your health is in order. I remember being extremely anxious and afraid. And I moved to Fort McMurray earlier this year to pursue a career as a paramedic and a firefighter, and to finish my advanced care paramedic diploma. So it's a smaller town, which means my resources are limited. And I know it would take a lot of work to find a rheumatologist who I liked, but also one that had time to see me and can comprehend my intensive medical history, because as Emma had described, you come with so much paper, this massive paper trail that is often hard to navigate. I opted to stay with my rheumatologist here in Calgary, so I will schedule my appointments when I know I'm coming home to visit my family. However, you do need to find a new place for blood work, which is something I needed to do because those are more frequent, and a new pharmacy as well. And like my team at the Children's Hospital, I developed a love and a bond with my pharmacy team as well. So it was uncomfortable explaining to someone who is my age why I needed a different pill bottle, because I struggled to open the ones that they dispense the prescriptions in. So when here in Calgary, they would know who I was as soon as I walked up to the counter. And they had known me for so long that seeing a 23-year-old with a chronic immune disorder was so normal to them. I know I'm being a bit of a negative Nelly, okay? But the purpose of my speech is to show you that, yes, this is a big process and it can feel so daunting, and you tend to hit the ground running at full speed in some ways, and you learn to grow up a bit faster than the rest because you have a new responsibility. However, if I'm sitting here telling you all this, then you know you're not alone, and that if I can survive being a bit uncomfortable, then you absolutely can as well. With anything, making mistakes and practicing makes perfect. I have also gone to the wrong clinic before, or I've forgotten my requisition for blood work at home, or I've let it expire. It's just a part of the process of trying to figure out something new. Of course, you'll understand how your new doctor is and how they practice medicine, and you'll learn how to advocate for yourself. You'll learn new tools available to help navigate the healthcare system. For example, Cassie and friends, how surprising. They don't use the word friends for no reason. There's a group of kids just like you who are here to help and walk you through it all. And Alberta Blue Cross helps with drug coverage here in Alberta, so that was really easy. And you're never on your own. And if you're moving away from home, let's say, or wanting some more independence at appointments, mom or dad are not going anywhere and they're only a call away. I said I'm 23, and sometimes I still need my mom, even though I'm not ever going to admit that to her. What helped me with all of these new changes was writing down all the questions that I had throughout the year. If they ever came up, I just pulled out the notes on my phone and started typing. I would, if I wanted, I lost my spot. I lost my train of thought. Where am I here? Oh, if my drugs. So if I knew I was going to be out of drugs, then I'd have to make sure that I came to my rheumatologist ready to know which prescriptions I would need. And I was hinting at maybe an x-ray, or if I would like physiotherapy. These are all options. You can always ask to be treated a certain way. So I never left the appointments until I understood the medical jargon also that's thrown at you. So I would never leave until I felt I had a clear answer and I could really understand what my health was at and kind of what my doctor was talking to me about. So thank you for listening to my story. The best advice I can give you is to tell you that everything you're going to feel is normal. And I know that that is such a, like a psychologist's way of saying things, but it's so true. It's okay to grieve, and it's okay to feel worried about how taking care of your health is going to look different now, and that there's a few extra steps that's going to come with it. But it isn't impossible, and you're going to be able to take small bites out of the big elephant. Mom and dad, you want the best for your babies, period. And when they're sick, I can only imagine that it's an overpowering feeling of protection that just takes over. And I can't imagine what my parents went through, and I can't imagine what you're going through, but you're transitioning too, and you can feel loss and you can grieve too. Reiterating what Evelyn said earlier, this is a process, not an event. So these were examples that had accumulated over several months and years. And if this crazy girl can manage it, then you're golden. And it just takes some time. So thank you for listening to my TED Talk. I'm gonna pass it back to Jennifer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. I totally laugh when you call yourself a negative Nelly because you are so sunshiny. And I swear I heard like every parent out in the Zoom land there, like exhale a sigh of relief when you said you still call mom. So amazing. Thank you. So with that, I'm really excited to introduce our next and last youth speaker before we head to our breakout rooms. And her name is Trish Peters. I actually first met Trish at a run event, and I met her, she was with her mom and dad, and she was accepting the Bonnie Cameron Scholarship, which is fundraised for by a run in Ontario and facilitated through Sick Kids. So I saw Trish for the first time with her mom and dad, and I have to say since then, I have seen her go through her transition process into this amazing, confident, feisty young adult who has made such a big contribution at Cassie and Friends. And Trish is now in her 4th year of a degree at the University of Ontario Institute of Technology. She studies commerce and finance, and I'm really excited to introduce you all to Trish.
Hello, can you see me?
We sure can.
Okay, perfect. I might echo a little bit. So, you know, I'm going to try to take this in another direction as the amazing speakers before me did. I'm more so going to talk about the transition that kind of happened outside of the doctor's office. A little bit of background, I was diagnosed at 11. I was diagnosed with JIA, and it was kind of everywhere, but I was able to get it under control very quickly, and I was, you know, having a jolly good time as a kid. As I got older, you know, I grew up a little bit. My methotrexate now had to be in needles rather than pills, and I hate needles. I still hate needles to this day. When I had to get the COVID shot, I almost cried. Like, it is not fun. We had a nurse that came to the house every week, but one day I wanted to go to a Raptors game. The nurse was running late, and my dad had to just take the job, and he had to be the one to do it instead of practicing on an apple like he always did. So that made me very dependent on mom and dad because I refused to give myself my needles. I know one of my friends, Julie, she's here today. She gives them to herself, and I'm very proud of her, but that would never be me. And I think that dependence on mom and dad made me really want to be independent as I got older. So when I finally got out of my pediatric rheumatologist, I came in to my adult rheumatologist, who I had no transition, nothing at all. We didn't have any meetings together with my pediatric rheumatologist. I actually found her through my 80-year-old neighbor who had just moved in, who also needed an adult rheumatologist in the area. So as I met her, she's very different than my pediatric rheumatologist, of course. She was a little bit more stringent on the fact that it was just a medical appointment, nothing extra. I couldn't ask her for birth control. I couldn't ask her for anything. I had to go to my family doctor for that. And I was really learning how to only, deal with arthritis for this one doctor. With my pediatric rheumatologist, I was able to ask her for literally anything. She would help me out, whether it would be folic acid, birth control, like literally anything she would help me out with. So I didn't really have a formal structure. I believe that I got really lucky with my neighbor, but that's a little bit more of the doctor side. I want to talk about the fact that when you turn 18, you graduate graduate high school, and you're going to university, or you're taking a gap year, you kind of become an adult in another sense. So when I went to university, I really wanted to be a normal kid, right? I grew up really wanting to be a normal kid. I played rugby for a long time, which was probably not recommended, but I did it anyway. So obviously when you get to university and you turn 19, people are going out a lot, they're drinking, they're doing this, they're doing that. But as someone with juvenile arthritis, not only are you now in a school where you have to have control over everything you do, the teachers are not pushing you as much. You have to be in control of your accessibility plan. You have to go and get all the forms signed. You also are in control of when you're going out, when you're studying, when you're hanging out with your friends. So that switch from high school to university is a big change. Add transitioning from doctors into that, it's a crazy change for someone who's only 18. So one of the questions that Brittany and Jennifer had really asked me that really got me thinking was, how do you set yourself up for success when you want to do everything? As I don't know if you can see, but I am currently at work. I suck at saying no to anything. I love doing everything. Currently, I'm holding 4 jobs and I go to school full time. So I don't know if I'm the best person to answer how do you say no to something, but someone with a rheumatic illness or a chronic illness, to be honest, any type of physical, mental illness, you really have to learn how to say no. I had an experience in the summer where I kind of had to put my foot down and say, well, this isn't helping me in any way, shape, or form, so I'm going to say no to it. But for kids that are going into university and they're transitioning doctors and transitioning schools, you want to set yourself up for success, and you want to say yes to everything because you never know what opportunity is out there. But my best advice would be that as soon as you're ready, as soon as you look at an opportunity that comes your way and you think about it and you say, okay, I'm not going to regret not doing this, you say no to it. Because if you fill up your entire schedule, eventually your physical will catch up to how much you're doing all the time. So a big part of obviously going to school is time management. And I think kids with chronic illnesses are set for this already, because as a kid, you have so many appointments, you have you have medications, you have this, you have that. And a lot of kids I know that are 16 and kind of aging, they often are already doing these things by themselves. So I don't think time management is a big problem. I think the biggest problem is finding balance. As a university student and as someone who is maybe working part-time, or as someone who is always surrounded by their friends, you really have to find the balance. Does this report require my attention, or do I want to hang out with my friends tonight? Where are you able to say no? A lot of the time, I think about it this way, my friends and my boyfriend have really bad FOMO, like they have really bad fear of missing out. And having arthritis kind of sets you up to not have the fear of missing out. I don't really care if I say no to a party because I know that I'm not going to regret it the next morning because I won't be in pain. And so just to wrap this all up, I'm just going to talk about the impact of all of this on your mental health. So when I went into university, I was struggling with anxiety. I've always struggled with anxiety. And it often showed up physically. So if I was really, really nervous about a big presentation the next day, my hand would start to hurt, or my knee would start to hurt, or, something would start to hurt. But I kind of figured out how to curb it because I realized that stressing myself out even more was making me hurt even more. So you really have to think about your mental health. The best thing I can tell you is talk to your parents, talk to your friends about it. Your friends will be a lot more understanding than you think. Your parents will be a lot more understanding about the way you're feeling mentally, especially than you think. And I think being set up with the fact that parents on this call, your child has a chronic illness that you don't often see. So that kind of sets you up for the mental health aspect as well. And my last thing, how to prepare yourself for the next step of taking the reins and leading your health journey. Just be ready. Get everything you can written down. Everything you have to do within a month, 2 months, write it down. I write literally everything down, whether it be on Post-it notes or a calendar. It doesn't matter. As long as I see it written down, I know that I have to do it. A lot of people use Google Calendar. It didn't really work for me because I just avoided looking at the app on my phone, on my iPad, on the computer. I just didn't look at it, so I didn't know what I had to get done. So write it down or put it somewhere that you know you're going to have to do it. Make lists of exactly what needs to be done when. If you're packing to go to university, start it early. Start a month in advance. At least you won't be stressing a week before. And when you get to university, make sure you start your presentations or you're studying for your midterm a couple weeks in advance rather than a couple days before. I'm still learning that one, so that one might take a little bit longer to take. But thank you all for listening to me. If you have any questions, you can find me on social media or through Jennifer and Cassie and friends. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Trish. See, that is why you're going on to big things in the corporate world, because you are organized and you talk so eloquently about your journey. And I just always love listening to you present. So now we are going to get on to the part of our presentation where we zoom away into our breakout rooms. I believe that any second you're going to see a little pop-up on your screen that's going to ask you to accept the invitation to your breakout room. And there you are going to meet even more youth, but from your centers or regions, as well as hear from the clinics that you attend or that are close by you. So I am just waiting here for that to happen. And while I do, I'll just say thank you one more time to our sponsor.